Hello, parents and teachers who may be watching. Welcome to Creating Math Ahas for Parents. I'm Dr. Sandy Atkins, Sandy, and in this video, we're going to look at the relationship between mixed numbers and improper fractions. Now, before I go any further, thanks so much to the subscribers. Welcome new subscribers. I hope you too will consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps a lot. Also, I'd like to say that this video is actually third in a series, if I think of it. The way I think of teaching fractions with your children, we tend to start with having them create fractional units. Excuse me. So they're just they might make them out of Play-Doh, they might make them out of paper. There's lots of different ways that they just make fractional units with all different shapes. Then they tend to make this kit, and we use the kit to find fraction relationships between the pieces, what happens when you combine them. Now, I'll leave the links to those two videos in the description below, so you can see those. But we're going to use this fraction kit to represent what we're doing with mixed numbers and improper fractions. Now, one other idea that's important for your child to understand is that ability to show multiple versions of a unit fraction. So a unit fraction, those would be the fractions that have a numerator of 1. So if I ask your child to show me 3 1/4 pieces, they might hold up, in this case, 3 of those orange pieces. And I say this in every video, notice how I don't label my fraction pieces. That's purposeful. If they're labeled, they tend to read it and they don't know why it's called 1/4 or 1/3. If I don't label, it's embedded practice. They get a chance to go back, compare them to the whole, and remember why we name a fraction a certain name. So that's very purposeful. You'll see in the videos I do, I tend not to use commercial pieces for exactly that reason. They tend to label them. So in our case, your children would know, because they've made it, that the orange piece happens to be 1/4. Now, I also should say the colors aren't important. It's important that all the children in the classrooms have the same colors, so you may find that your child's kit matches those in the classroom, but they might not match the colors used in another classroom. That's perfectly okay, right? It's more important they understand the name in relation to the whole. Now, your child's holding up 3 1/4 pieces, and I could say, oh, what did you have? You had 3 1/4 pieces is the same as a fourth put together with a fourth combined with another fourth. Now notice the language I'm using for the plus sign, combined and put together, that conceptual language. And your child is seeing adding fractions, and I'm calling that 3/4, both 3/4 and 3 1/4 pieces. Think of the imagery that comes to mind when I think of that numerator as naming the number of unit fraction pieces. I have 3 1/4 pieces. That's going to become important when we look at mixed numbers and improper fractions. Now, another connection we make with your children very early on, before they learn the mechanics of addition or multiplication. See, I can represent the symbolism. That's a way I differentiate for your children, right? I can show that symbolism that's more complex, but my language is still, so 3 1/4 pieces when they're seeing multiplication is the same as 3/4. Now, we want them to be able to show mixed numbers. And a mixed number is actually that. It combines, it mixes wholes with the parts, right? So in this case, we have 1 put together with 1/2. And we could actually represent 1 1/2 as 1 plus 1/2, right? We want your children to understand that the mixed numbers, we talk about number of wholes and the parts. Now, when your children are first showing 1 and 1/2 with their fraction pieces, they might do it as a long strip, right? But we want them to know that they could also do them side by side vertically. They could do it horizontally. But remember, whatever they build, they draw. And when your children build this, and then they tend to draw that, right? Let's look at the top one. They tend to draw that nice, long, elongated one. See, that bottom one that they're looking at, where you have the whole with the 1/2 underneath, it's easier for us to see the relationship between the half and the whole than when it is elongated. When it's elongated, when they're all side by side, after a while, all the pieces start to look the same. So it's purposeful to me to have them build it, and I tend to like that bottom way where they build it, where it's stacked, and then they draw it in that way. And everything, that relationship is shown. So we've got that 1.5. We've shown it this way. Mathematically, there was nothing wrong with those other ways, but we want to use drawings and come to understand some drawings, some representations will be more useful to us at times. This is one of those times. Now, think about showing another mixed number. I want to show 2 3/4. So I've got the 2 wholes and the 3 1/4 pieces. And with mixed numbers, we really want them to understand at most we're going to use 2 colors in the end, right? That's our final. Because I could show 2 3/4 with 2 wholes, a half, and a fourth, but that gets a little trickier, right? We want to come back to that 3 1/4 pieces in the end. Notice I build it and I draw it. Now, when we're going towards improper fractions, what we're going to think about is how many of the unit fraction, that 1/4 piece, will fit inside of the 2 3/4. Now, if you notice what I've done, it's the same size, it's equivalent sizes to the 2 3/4, but this time I use 11 1/4 pieces. In the improper fraction, it's telling us how many unit fraction pieces we're going to need versus the mixed number that shows us wholes and parts to make that equivalent size piece. So we end up learning that 2 3/4 is equivalent to the 11 1/4 pieces. Or 2 and 3 1/4 pieces is equivalent to 11 1/4 pieces. Now, let's go the other direction. See, if I have the improper fraction, I know the number of unit fraction pieces I'm working with, in this case, 22 of those 1/6 pieces. When I'm thinking about going to a mixed number, I want to think about how many wholes and parts. Now, with this drawing, see, it's pretty clear how many wholes and parts once I've drawn it. I can see I'm going to have 3 wholes and then 4 1/6 pieces left over. So I've got 3 and 4 1/6, right, pieces. 3 and 4 6 is going to end up being equivalent sizes to the 22 1/6 pieces. 22 6 is equivalent. Now, when I learned this, we tended to learn an algorithm. We learned a procedure where you divided, you found the remainders. But do you see when it comes to conceptual understanding, we want this visual image. And from practice and lots of examples, they'll tell us, oh, well, I knew there were 18 and the wholes, 3 wholes, and then I had 4 more. They start to actually discuss that procedure before they've been taught or shown that procedure. It's much more powerful this first way, right? Is to notice it and come up with it through the examples they're doing. Now, when we were here, many of you are like, oh, it's non-simplest form. And depending upon your district, some of what they're looking for, they might not require it to go into a simpler form because this is mathematically correct. Nothing wrong with it. But when we think of simpler form, we want to think about how could we make the equivalent size, 2 colors, but using the fewest number of pieces. See, that's how I'm thinking about simpler form. I need fewer pieces. So how could I make that 3 and 4 6? Well, I could make it with 3 wholes and 2 1/3 pieces. So all those are equivalent, whether I have the improper fraction that tells me the number of unit fraction pieces I have, that numerator. I have a mixed number that gives me the wholes and the parts, but it might not be the simplest form, or I could write as a simplest form. All of those would be equivalent ways of looking at the same region, I guess, in this. We're using an area model here. They would also be ways of talking about the same location on a number line, all equivalent. Okay. So I hope that helped. I hope that makes sense. If you found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. Please share with others. If you haven't already, again, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's very helpful. Click on that notifications bell so that you know when other videos become available. I'll leave those links in the description below from the other videos that I've shared on fractions, so you'll have those. And thanks so much for watching.